On our show today, nutritional therapist and author Alia Almoayed. Alia, welcome to our program.
Thank you very much.
What does a nutritional therapist do?
Well, we do consultations where people come to us and they get advice on how to improve their health. So they don't necessarily have to be sick. They might even come just for prevention. If you want to get healthier and you want to know how to improve your life through diet and nutrition. Or you could actually have a specific health condition that you want to improve away from the medical approach. You know, if you don't want to take medicine, or if you want to complement the medical approach, we can give you advice on how to let diet and vitamins and nutrients and nature help you improve.
So how did working on a diet become such an important part of your professional diet?
To be honest, it was from a personal experience. I wasn't intending to become a nutritionist. I was actually happy in my public relations career, and I was into marketing and all of that. And then at some point in my life, I wasn't feeling very well. And I went from one doctor to another, and you know, the answers that I was getting were not very satisfactory to me because I still didn't feel good.
Okay.
So I started Googling myself, and I started implementing natural therapy on myself, and I realized it works. I started feeling better. And I fell in love with the subject, and I actually decided at some point to change careers completely. And I made a very difficult decision to start all over again. And I qualified as a nutritional therapist because I thought, if I can make that change for myself, and if it helped me so much, I must be able to help others as well. So I brought that to Bahrain and the Middle East. At the time when I started, there was nobody else that was doing it. So it was very badly needed. It's still needed in the whole world, but people are becoming more conscious of it at the moment. So.
Right. Alia, unhealthy eating habits are something that we all naturally gravitate towards,
Yeah.
whether it's junk food or feel-good food, you know, or stress busters. But then how is something which is so personal and so critical to our own body, and we know so little about what works for our body?
You're very right. You know, I lecture teenagers sometimes, and you see these 17, 18-year-olds who are about to go to college, and they know everything about science, about math, about academics. They're so highly qualified and such good grades, and you ask them simple questions about the human body and how it works, and I ask them, for example, I say, let's say you go to college and you gain weight, what would you do? They have no idea what they would do. And it's a shame, because in our society, and not just in India, everywhere in the world, we know so much about so many things, but we don't know enough about this body that we will carry for the rest of our lives. We don't know how to deal with it when it's depressed. We don't know how to deal with it when it gains weight or loses weight. So that's why I feel education, especially for the younger generation, is so important. But it starts from the parents.
Okay.
It starts from the parents. And you know, when maybe somebody is going through something difficult in their life, you always end up craving the things you had in your childhood.
Comfort food.
The comfort foods usually are things that come from your childhood. So my goal in life is to help mothers make the household so healthy that the child, that becomes his comfort food.
Okay.
So that later on in life, even if he has a difficult time or he's going through stress, he craves the food he had at home, and that should be the healthy food.
All right.
So let's say if you're a mother and you're constantly offering your children salads and beans and lentils and things like this, is the food that they will be craving. The reason we crave junk is because we had junk as children, and we had the chips and the chocolates and all of that.
Okay.
So if you imagine you just switch that, and it doesn't mean you have to remove it altogether, but you just switch it and remove the focus and make it more on healthy food, that's what they will end up craving.
All right. So your latest offering to the reading world, I Want Healthy Kids,
Yes.
has an interesting story behind this writing of this book.
Yes.
Do share that with us.
Yes, this book, again, it started after I qualified as a nutritional therapist. I thought, you know, I'll help all the people, and I'll change the world, and I'll revolutionize the health industry. And I had all these information and theories and books about everything. And I knew that there was a problem with mothers, and they wanted to feed their children healthy food and didn't know how. So I came up with all these handouts and outlines and information for mothers. And then I had kids. And you realize it's very difficult to make children eat something unless they're convinced. They have their own likes and dislikes. They have their own taste. They have mood swings. They have tantrums. Even at a very young age, they have a very strong personality and character. And you can't just bring a theory and apply it to them. You have to actually back it up. You have to have an approach. You have to market it in a way. So I kind of used my children as guinea pigs, and I tried to, experiment with them. A lot of it worked. Much of it failed as well. And between trial and error. And this book was kind of the accumulation of all these advice that I tried and tested. And I ended up giving them to mothers even before I wrote the book. So I was giving them as handouts, and then the handouts became bigger booklets. And then I decided, why not just make it a book? And that way I can help more people without them having to come and see me personally.
All right.
So this book is an accumulation of all these tried and tested methods for parents, but also for teachers, for caretakers, for grandmothers as well.
Okay.
And also for a child who's old enough to read. They can also approach this book. There's a lot of tips and ideas and quizzes and things like that they can benefit from at a certain age when they can read.
So how our health behaves and who we are is a function of what we put into our mouths and what we eat. But it's also a function of what we put into our heads. What's the relationship between a healthy mind and a healthy body?
Good question. The mind is always related to the digestive system, always. That's why when you're nervous, you get butterflies in your stomach. When when you've gone through a traumatic experience, you get diarrhea, for example. They're always connected. But what's fascinating is that they've discovered between the mind and the digestive tract, there's a link, like a highway that links the two. That's why they're connected. Okay? Now this highway is called the vagus nerve. On the vagus nerve, the communication happens between the head and the digestive system. Now this research is very interesting because it discovered that only 10% of communication happens from the head to the stomach. Only 10%.
Okay.
So let's say your stomach is going through a difficult, you're having butterflies and everything. You can think yourself into having a calmer body, but only to an extent of 10%. The other 90% of communication happens the other way around, from the digestive system to the brain. Which means that not only do your thoughts affect your digestive system, it means that more so, what's happening inside your digestive system and what you're eating is actually affecting your mentality.
Okay.
Affecting anxiety levels, affecting your ability to calm down after stress, affecting your mindset, affecting all of that. So when we're talking about anxiety levels in society, which are higher than they've ever been, we're talking about anxiety in children, we're talking about depression rates that are higher than they've ever been. You realize that you can actually affect that by first thinking of what you're eating and then helping the brain.
Okay.
Because that will automatically help the brain. When you eat well, you become in a good mood. And a lot of people, sometimes when I talk about this, they tell me, oh, you only live once, let's eat and let's enjoy our life, what's the difference? And I say, you're gonna live once, but you could live happily or you could live miserably.
Okay.
And what you eat will actually change, literally, your happiness factor. So you could shift the way you look at life, your outlook on life can change based on how happy your stomach is.
Healthy foods are not very difficult to get.
Yes.
Why is it such a difficult habit to get?
The healthy habit, I think, I don't think it's a healthy habit to get. I think we think it's a healthy habit to get. That's what I used to think. We always think that, I don't know, maybe we think that a coffee is easier than a green juice, or a coffee is easier than a fresh juice, or a chocolate is easier than an apple. But I think it's just in our heads.
It's a construct, a mental construct.
It's something that we've culturally built ourselves into believing. And because that has become the convenience food today. If you go to any cafe, or that's what they offer, because that's what people started demanding. So it's a vicious cycle, kind of. They offered it, and then we demanded it, and now we're demanding it, so they're offering it. So we've entered into this vicious cycle. But if more people start demanding apples for snacks, then the people will start offering them. The cafes will start offering them. Schools will start offering them. Right. But it's because we're not demanding them. But I don't think it's a difficult habit to have at all. In fact, it's much cheaper to eat an apple or a cucumber than it is to eat a pack of chips. Or in the long run, it's much cheaper as well. Because what you eat now is literally the investment you're making into your health in the long run.
Right.
So
It's going
it
to
works
give you
out.
dividends after some
Yes,
time.
even from a like a health insurance perspective, it's
Right.
you're investing into prevention of disease. You
So
know.
that's a mental construct and a myth, you think.
Yes.
And the other myth, please help us break that, to say that healthy may not be tasty or healthy is not tasty.
Yes, that's a very big myth, because we associate healthy food with like hospital food, boiled vegetables that are boiled to death and no taste and nothing. But nature actually offers us all the flavors that our taste buds need. So if you add a variety of everything, so if you try the different fruits, you'll see that each fruit has a different level of sugar, has a different level of moisture, taste, texture. Each one offers us something different. So the key is not to make it boring. When we boil it to death, then we are killing all the flavors and the textures in it. So it's about, it just takes an extra minute to Google a fun recipe to make. You know, when you think of salad, if I tell you eat salad, people are probably thinking just white lettuce leaves and, you know, just boring iceberg lettuce with a few cucumbers. But why not make a salad, include mushrooms, for example, include corn, include even chickpeas, sprouted mung beans, even cooked lentils, or beetroot, you know, things that would add color, would add flavor, and then they tell you, oh, that's a salad? Yeah, of course it's a salad. People always think that a salad is a boring meal that I will still be starving afterwards.
Okay.
It doesn't mean a salad can be boring. A salad can actually be very filling, very nutritious, and very tasty at the same time.
Right. And the most beautiful part about the human body is, once you get it used to something, then it craves that.
Yes.
It asks for that.
Yes.
You know?
You know, eating habits are actually learned. They're not inherited. You're not born with an eating habit. You're not born with an eating preference. And a lot of mothers come to me and tell me, oh, my son loves chocolate because I love chocolate. He can't. He didn't inherit genetically that love of chocolate. He inherited the tendency to have chocolate in his environment. He sees you having it, that's why he has it. So eating habits are completely learned. And the good news is that if they're completely learned, that means they can be unlearned.
Okay.
So you can undo them and learn new ones.
All right. Ali, we're going to go in for a short break.
Okay.
When we come back, we'd want to understand from you that the Indian system of medicine, Ayurveda, believes that body types are different. So the same healthy diet may not work for all because it depends on your body type. What is the Western concept vis-a-vis that? Do they fit in together? And maybe some more myths about food that you could break for us?
Sure.
But right now, a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. We're still in conversation with nutritional therapist and author Alia Almoayed. Alia, talking of the Indian system, which says that every body type is different, and based on your dosha and your prakriti and your praviti, you choose particular foods that work better and you balance your energies. How does the Western concept of a good diet fit in with that?
I think, unfortunately, the Western concept, maybe the mainstream Western concept, does not really take that into consideration, because you have these fad diets that come out and they claim to fit everybody. Now, people sometimes come to me expecting me to give them a diet, and I tell them if I had a diet, an off-the-shelf diet that I can give out, then there would be no point of me lecturing or talking about anything or even writing the book, because if it's the perfect diet, then it fits for everybody, right? But we can't, because we have to take into consideration what they call biochemical individuality. So what I give to you today will be affected by your age, your gender, your stress levels, your lifestyle, your likes and dislikes. So even if I come up with the so-called perfect diet for you, you might not feel like having it. Let's say in 3 days you get sick of it, your body starts to shut down, it doesn't want it anymore. You have to take that into consideration. So we work with people to find out like a good middle. You know, we compromise on things. So we say, what do you like? And within your likes, we come up with the menu. And then we say, what does your body need? So it needs X, Y, and Z. How do we incorporate these things into the menu? So your stress level is X, and this is how much nutrients it needs, and this is how we can put them in. How do you feel we can work around that?
Okay.
And that's the only way to work, because if you're going on a diet for 2 weeks and you're struggling, you can do it. And I give you this starvation diet or whatever, and you really push yourself and you do it for about 2 weeks. We're not talking about short-term diets. We're talking about lifestyle changes. We're talking about mindset changes, where you start feeding your body what it needs so that it can give you back optimum health. And most people who prefer not to do that are people who don't realize what their life could be like when they're living in that zone, when they can achieve to their optimum potential. You know, your productivity gets higher, your mentality, you're just a happier person who can produce a lot more. So it becomes attractive to you, and it also becomes attractive to your employers. For example, they want to have employees who have high productivity and a happy environment to live in, to work in.
True. One of the challenges of bringing up kids is that there is a lot of peer pressure.
Yes.
And children have, I wouldn't say warped, but a little distorted body image in terms of role models and how they see themselves. So for mothers to challenge this myth that thin is not fit,
Yes.
slim is always not fit, and how do you balance that thought in the kid's head and say, okay, it's okay to have some fat and some muscle on your bones, be healthy, that's more important than the peer pressure.
I want to give you an example. I had one mother that came to me with her 9-year-old daughter. And she came with the daughter and they sat in my office, and then I said, so what do you feel is the problem? Where do you feel we need to work? And she pointed at her daughter's stomach area and she told me, this is what we need to work with. Now you have to understand the daughter had no weight problem. She did not have a weight issue. There was no stomach problem that the mother was pointing to. And what I did is I told the girl to wait outside for a minute in the waiting area, and I ended up speaking to the mother. Because the problem is that we sometimes put our own weight issues and our own health problems, we put that baggage on our children. And if we don't have perfection, sometimes we want them to have perfection. So there is peer pressure, but there is also sometimes parental pressure.
Okay.
It may be even subconscious. Nobody wants to harm their children or to affect them psychologically.
But sometimes if you see a mother or a father constantly fretting about their own weight and checking themselves out in the mirror, kids pick it up.
The kids pick it up, and if you're a mother who's had weight problems and struggled with them, you want to save your child from having to go through the same thing, right? It's out of love, actually. But they don't realize that that love is what is causing the destruction. So the children get it from the peers, they get it from the parents at home, and they get it from the media. So there's several factors involved. So what I would suggest people do is just to sit with the child and see, are they affected? Sometimes they're not affected. Sometimes we're affected, they're fine. So if they're not affected, we leave them alone. There's no need to overemphasize something that doesn't exist. However, if they are affected, then we have a discussion about what do you think she's going through. Is she having weight struggles? Look at ads, look at magazines, with girls especially, because the thin standards now have become so high. But look at magazines and say, do you know what it means to be airbrushed? Do you know what they do to photography? Do you know what, filters, even in television, you put filters and makeup and all of that. So explain that a normal person doesn't have to have those pressures included and put on them as well. So just open discussion, because most girls, especially when I lecture, even the boys actually, I did a lecture once for teenagers, and I said, what questions do you have? And then I got silence. Nobody had any question. Then I said, okay, you know what? Just write your questions anonymously on pieces of paper and bring them all to me. Everybody started writing. And there was a lot of questions of my body image. I don't know if I'm too thin. I don't know if I'm too fat, etc. So I was shocked, and I said, how many of you can go to their parents with these questions? Maybe 2 out of a class of 50. Just 2 were able to go to their parents. I mean, of course, this is not a sample that applies to the whole world, but it's quite accurate. So what I'm suggesting now is open communication, without having a discussion about, we're going to discuss your weight now because you've gained weight. No, we're going to discuss general pressures for people to look a certain way. Do you feel pressured? Do you feel that you have to look the same? Do you feel that all the girls in your class look the same and feel that they have to? Do you feel, it's just open communication. And sometimes because of love, the conversation between parents and children tends to be advice, 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 advice. I'm always lecturing you, I'm always talking at you, as opposed to, let's open a conversation. Tell me how you feel about these pressures. They used to exist, for example, I can say they used to exist in my time. I used to feel pressured as a teenager. Do you?
Yeah, so some personal stories and examples always help.
Yes,
they do.
yes,
Right.
definitely. And it helps when you tell them, I was also vulnerable at your age. You know, because sometimes they think, oh, my mother is perfect and she expects me to be perfect as well. Well, then no, then say, I had problems as well. We all had problems trying to fit into a certain mold that society is trying to put us in, you know?
Right. And I think the first thing about any issue, whether it's self-esteem, whether it's weight, or whether it's an emotional issue, is you need to first accept whatever it is,
Yes.
like that.
Yes.
And then with love make it move from there.
Yes.
And that's so
Yes.
critical with children
Yes,
also.
even if they are overweight and even if they are struggling like you struggled, and even if you hate the fact that she is not happy with, she needs to know that you accept that, or he needs to know that you accept
And
it.
that you struggle with her.
Yes,
you know?
yes, and that you're there to help, not to
Absolutely.
lecture and advise all the time.
Absolutely.
But I mean, weight aside, I know people always talk about weight, but even acne is a big problem. Self-esteem wise, acne is a very big issue for teenagers. For children, even wearing glasses sometimes, or having braces, or, you know, there's things that we might not think are a big deal.
And children can be very cruel too.
Children can be cruel and they can be harsh on themselves
Absolutely,
as well.
very
you know?
self-critical.
Yes, yes. So we just have to be there to say, oh, we love you the way you are, and we know things can be tough, and we're there to just help you as you go through it. We might not be able to solve it. Fact. I might not be able to solve it
But
for
you're still
you.
mine and you belong
But
to
I'm
me.
there,
so,
yes,
yeah.
and I'm there, and I'll help you, and I'll hold your hand as we go through this phase.
All right. So when you talk of a mother's role, and the book says, I want healthy kids, so it's targeted primarily at somebody in a parenting or a caregiving role.
Yes.
Then what are some fun ways in which mothers can really get healthy kids and help kids participate in their own health?
Very good question. I think the first thing is that, I mean, there are so many suggestions in the book, but the first thing I suggest is that get the child involved in the step before you reach the house. So before you even get to the kitchen, take the child with you to buy the food. Let them see where the food you're buying it from, where is it coming from the supermarket, from the vegetable vendor, from wherever it is. Because you have to give them some sort of authority to feel that they had to do with the selection process.
Okay.
They are much more likely to get involved and to enjoy the meal if they feel that they had something to do with the selection process. So it doesn't have to be every time you go shopping. You know, life has stresses and most mothers work and it can be difficult. But let's say once in a while, once a month even, you say you're coming with me and you get to select any vegetable you want and we can experiment with cooking it. And the next time you select whatever fruit and we get to experiment with cooking it. You'll see that the involvement process becomes a lot more and they become a lot more likely to eat it, as opposed to come sit to dinner and when you're sitting to dinner, this is what you're eating. He doesn't know how much it costs, he doesn't know, you know, just make it fun. And even if you pick like a cereal box, for example, let's read the ingredients, let's see, is this something we want to eat? Does it have ingredients that we feel will feed us, or does it have just food colorings and chemicals that we'd rather not have?
Right.
So involve them in the selection process.
Okay, what else?
Another thing is to actually use, I know this sounds very funny, but to actually use utensils in the eating process that are not necessarily just a fork or a spoon. You can put cocktail sticks, you can use chopsticks, you can let them, I mean, children naturally prefer to eat with their hands, so they can experiment with the textures. But also go a step further, like if you're giving them olives, for example, and you want them to try olives, why not have these little umbrella sticks that they're sold everywhere and they're
Make
very
it like
easy
a game of fun.
Make it like a game of fun, and even, I mean, just put a little buffet selection, like let's say raisins and olives and little apple cubes or whatever. Even it can be a snack, it's something simple. But then we eat them with chopsticks, or we eat them with toothpicks, or we eat them with, you know, just to make it a bit more exciting. That removes the pressure of the food and the attention of the food and puts it on the process. And they forget. They actually forget.
Play with your food.
Yeah, and you can play with your food. Most of the time, mothers say,
told,
don't play with your food.
Absolutely.
But no, I actually say play, because that's how they experiment with textures. You know, children don't only taste with their tongues; they taste with their eyes and their nose and their hands and fingers, and all the senses need to be involved.
Because we believe, and this is an interesting fact that I learned, that we eat with our hands.
Yes.
And they say that the process of digestion begins with the
Yes,
sensation
imagine,
of touch, and it starts from the
And we have
fingertips.
the most sensitive nerves here, so they actually do start the tasting process and the
And it's
involvement.
tastier, you know.
Yes, yes.
I believe so.
And it's something old that was done. Again, it's one of those things. I mean, it's done in the Indian culture. It's done in the Arab culture. It's something that is now being phased out, unfortunately. But we can always go back to it. And we find that, you know, my one of my teachers in college, she used to say that she collects old medical books, very old medical books. And I was asking her, I'm very curious, why do you collect old medical books? And she said, because if you go back long enough into medicine, you'll realize it was nutrition. It was based on the theories that we teach today. So because they didn't have the medicine that came recently, the antibiotics and all of that, so they had to depend on herbs and trees and vegetables and things like that. So if you go back long enough into history, you actually find that that was the medicine that we're talking about today. Okay. And then if you go back long enough even into your grandparents' age, that was the way they did it before. For example, in the book I talk about dairy alternatives, for example, alternatives that you can have instead of having milk. And we talk about having almond milk and, you know, processing the almond, mixing it and then sieving it and having the almond milk. And I was telling my mother I found a great recipe and, you know, I'm trying it at home and it tastes great. And she said, oh, your grandmother used to make that all the time. So why didn't you tell me? I didn't know, because there was a generation where that stopped. Because milk became commercial and it became convenient, and there was formula milk and there was God knows what. And the 60s and 70s actually was very revolutionary for a lot of people, because it saved them a lot of things, of course, but even breastfeeding went out of fashion, and the old methods went out of fashion.
I think somewhere, you know, the Industrial Revolution, it revolutionized a lot more in our lives. Maybe
Yes.
not necessarily for the, maybe for a larger good, for a cause sometimes, but the fallout is seen now.
Yes,
you know.
yes. And now there's a comeback, which is nice. The comeback to natural health is becoming more fashionable than it used to be. It used to be like in my mother's generation, for example, it used to be outdated that we do these things, or we make milk at home, and, you know, it became out of fashion. And now it's coming back into fashion.
Right.
Which is nice. It's becoming the norm now to actually want to do things naturally and want to start looking at alternatives, healthier alternatives to things.
Another fun way is, Ali, to cook with them, right? To cook with the kids?
Yes, 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 of course. Let them cook. I mean, let them experiment with, again, how the food changes form. How does it taste when it starts to cook? How does it change when it starts to sizzle? We have a game, when my children were much younger, we had a game that we put a crunchy salad, so we put lettuce leaves, and we had a game where we dip it in dressing. And then the game is who makes the loudest crunch sound with their salad. And it sounds very stupid, but they actually get very competitive. And before you know it, they've eaten 10 salad leaves because they're still waiting for the one that makes the highest crunch. And we'd have a judge and we'd laugh about it and who's judging what and how much crunch. And it's a stupid game, but it's actually, it works. It works. So you can do it with any vegetables, even vegetable sticks. Which vegetable has the highest crunch sound?
Celery.
You know, it appeals probably. Celery, good
Celery.
answer. Celery, carrot probably also.
So what I'm hearing you say is that the biggest advantage of a healthy food habit is it's the habit. So you don't have to constantly assess over a period of time whether what you're eating or not is healthy and kind of keep checking it out. Once you've set a habit, then it becomes a beautiful virtuous cycle.
Yes, yes. Now imagine if you're sitting at the dinner table and I'm sitting with you and I'm very angry because I want you to finish your food. The chances are you will also get tense because you know that I'm watching you eat and you know that I'm waiting for you to finish that food. And now imagine that I'm done with my food, so I get up and I stand behind you and I say, eat it. Until you finish it, I'm not moving. It becomes a very tense process, and a lot of parents do that, unfortunately. You haven't finished your food and the mother is tense. The eating process has a lot of energy involved in it, and children pick up energy like that, even before we do.
True.
So when the eating time becomes electrocuted like that and it becomes tense, they start repeating that same behavior next time, because yesterday I was tense, so I'm sure today she'll also be angry, so I'll be tense again today. And the eating time becomes a stressful process. And when you're stressed when you're eating, you don't want to eat. I mean, if you're having an argument over dinner, you automatically say, you know what, I'm full. I don't want to eat anymore. And this is what happens. And mothers don't realize that they are causing their own heartache by becoming angry about the child, whether the child eats or not. So what I say is that you're bringing so much emotion and so much expectation into the meal that you're bound to get disappointed. So just leave it. Whether he eats or not, just leave it. But you keep offering the healthy things, and he can decide whether he eats it or not. By day 3, he will probably be hungry enough to eat it. But we're so paranoid about, oh, he slept on an empty stomach, or he didn't eat enough today, or nothing's going to happen. The worst is that he's going to be hungry, very hungry tomorrow. And when he's very hungry tomorrow, then you still have the healthy food.
And the other thing, Alia, you know, if you don't eat joyously, then the food that you even stuff into your mouth really doesn't work for your body.
True. The digestive system actually stops when you're going through stress. Because if you're going through stress and there's a lion behind you, for example, in nature, there's no time to start digesting and doing enzymes. And so your body doesn't know that there is no lion, but it knows that you're stressed, so it'll shut down. It'll actually go into...
There's a lion with the mother standing.
The mother is the lion, yeah. But we have another... So you brought up a very interesting point. There's something that I call the food court mentality, where you offer something on the table and then the child says, no, I don't like this. And you say, oh, what else can I give you then? What would you like? Would you rather have a sandwich? Would you rather have so-and-so? And the house becomes like as if it's a food court, as if the dining table and the kitchen is, you know, the father eats his dinner and then the daughter wants something else and this child wants something else. And it becomes a food court, and you miss the whole point. The whole point is to offer the healthy options, maybe have 2 or 3 kinds, but that's it. That's what's being offered. Because if I'm a child and I know that if I say no to this, then my favorite option is right there, it's available, what's my incentive to eat this? Why would I eat it? If I know that I have a cheese sandwich right around the corner and I would rather have that, then I'll just keep saying no to this.
And also children, when you offer it to them and you're happily eating it, they're very open to experimenting. So somewhere it's a myth to say children don't like to try new stuff. In fact, they experiment naturally.
There is a research, very interesting research, that says that children need to see a new food 20 times before they're willing to try it. And the research also shows that most parents give up after the 2nd time. So let's say I tell you a new suggestion in the book. For example, you're going to try chickpeas in a salad, and he's never had that before. He needs to see it 20 times before he agrees to taste it, let alone like it. So most parents give up too soon. And by the 20th time, imagine you're putting it every day, and he sees you eating it, and he sees you making all these amazing sounds about how fantastic it tastes with no pressure. You don't even need to look at him while you're doing it, because they understand, right? So you can even pretend it's yours.
And you might just give them a little bit of
if he really wants that, okay, you're only allowed 1 piece. Reverse psychology really works very well with children. And sure enough, by the 20th time, he will try it. And after that, then you can work towards him liking it. But to expect him to like it, let's say you read the book and you get very excited and you go home, you make all these dishes and you put them in front of your child and he doesn't want them, you shouldn't be getting stressed, and you shouldn't be expecting him to like it from the beginning, because it's very unlikely to happen. Adults won't do it. Why should a child do it?
So now we also know that children are becoming conscious, because I think there is positive peer pressure also acting on children in terms of food, and that is now working 1 generation up. Some stories on that? I see a lot of examples like that, because my children go to school and they each bring their own food, and of course now they're a bit older, but you notice now some children, even at age 12 or 13, maybe just before they reach teenage years, they actually have preferences, and they don't necessarily have the ability to bring them from the home. So they start pressuring their own mothers to bring them, to say, I have so-and-so in school brought X, and I want to have like her. When my daughter was much younger, when she was in preschool, I used to send a lunchbox with her, and I knew that it was probably the healthiest of the lot, because I see sometimes what they bring, the chocolates and the biscuits and the chips and all of that. So I was always conscious of whether she's going to develop a complex because of that, or whether she's going to be picked on or feel out of place. And being a nutritionist especially, you're aware of these things. I don't want her to stand out too much. One day I was surprised. She actually came to me and she said, Mama, can you please put extra raisins for me in the lunchbox, because my best friend always takes mine and she likes it.
And I told her, why doesn't she tell her mother to put some for her? She said, no, she told her mother and her mother didn't. You know, when they're young, maybe she didn't even know how to ask the mother, or the mother didn't listen. I don't know. But it was nice because at that point I realized she can have an effect, and it can work the other way around. So they can pressure her into wanting Oreos and chips and things like that in her lunchbox, but it could also work the other way around. They might want to now have almonds and raisins and I don't know, corn on the cob and things like that in their lunchbox instead. And it has become, and even now when they're older, she tells me that friend still steals things from my lunchbox, and you know, she ends up taking extra for her, and it's nice because that friend knows exactly what she wants to eat, and soon enough she will be able to buy her own, and that's what she will buy because she was seeing it in my daughter's lunchbox. If she hadn't seen it, she might have not even known she liked it. True. So the more children we have giving that example, then that eventually will become the cool norm thing.
Okay. I speak to a lot of young people, a lot of children, I would say in the age group of 8 to 12 on eating habits. What are some of the challenges you face while speaking to them?
Well, the biggest challenge I face when I speak to them is that they don't want to look like they believe you. You know, I've had a few cases where the child is convinced and they're willing to try the food, but they don't want their friend to know that they want to try that food because it's not cool. So you have to bring it in a way that makes it look like it is a cool thing to do, because you're not being the nerd who wants to now try dates or almonds or things like that. You want it to be cool enough. So in a recent experience, I was speaking to my son's class. They were all 10-year-olds. And I wanted to speak to them about superfoods, about how important it is to actually have food that has a high nutrient level, because it can actually feed you, and then your body can start building and achieving and creating. And how to make that interesting enough without making it sound like it's just another boring lecture that they're going to have to sit through in school. And so I gave them the example of being aliens. I told them, imagine you're aliens, and imagine your boss in your planet is asking you to go to Earth and to eat humans and to get superpowers. So you need to be stronger and smarter. What humans would you eat? Would you eat the superheroes and the geniuses? Or would you eat the tired, lethargic, lazy ones? And they got it. They were all very excited. They said, no, we'll eat the superheroes. I'll eat Superman. I'll eat the smartest. I'll eat the so-and-so. And then I said, imagine you're humans again, and imagine you need to have these superpowers. You need to be smarter, stronger, and better looking. Would you eat the superfoods, or would you eat the dead food that's been processed and cooked to death? And they understood. And then I said, I have a few examples of some superfoods, and they are actually foods that you might find in your kitchen anyway, but did you know they contained X, Y, and Z, and that they can give you superpowers and they can make you stronger? And I wasn't lying. There are foods that are very high nutrient value that can give a lot of nutrients to the child. Right. So we talked about dates, and we talked about almonds, and I can't remember what else we talked about. And then I had in my handbag a big jar of sprouted mung beans. And I thought I'll just show it to them, because there's no way, I mean, this is a new food and the 20 times rule, and there's no way that they're going to try it. And to my surprise, they all wanted to try it, because by then I had built them up so much that they really wanted these superfoods. They wanted to see what it's like to have these superpowers. And it was only a 15-minute lecture. It's not like I spent a whole hour and I prepared. So any mother can do it. You know, any mother can talk about, do you know how much value this has, and do you know what it can do to your muscles? Do you know what it can do to the muscles that will help you shoot the football, for example, to be specific enough so that the child gets convinced.
Right.
And they all wanted to try it. They were all taking handfuls and putting in their pocket. And I was really very pleasantly surprised.
How gratifying that must be.
Yes.
Alia, you have your own TV show, you're a mother, you write books, and you counsel people.
Yes.
You're a nutritional therapist. At a personal level, other than healthy food, what keeps you going?
I think the passion behind it is what keeps me going. Every time I feel, you know, I've gone through a personal illness, as you know, and that improved significantly. So my passion to help others who might still be struggling in the situation that I was in before. Having said that, every time I think I've reached, and I think I've maybe maxed out all the information I could get about a certain topic or about the nutrition topic, I don't know why, but God puts me in a situation where I have to go back to scratch and relearn either a personal illness again, or an illness of a loved one, or a situation, or a stress, or I always end up going through something that pushes me a bit further and pushes my own limits and pushes my own comfort zone so that I can research further and grow further. And I do believe, of course, in the divine plan and in believing that you are meant to do this for a specific reason. And always, always, after going through a specific condition where I research it for myself and I end up applying it to myself or applying it to a loved one, I always get a number of people after that who ask me about the same condition.
Okay.
And I find that very fascinating, very, very fascinating, because it's almost like you get the weapons and you get the information and then you get the people who need it. And of course, sometimes that happens
like
simultaneously.
You're being prepared.
Yes, yes. And I'm very grateful for that. Sometimes it's not the easiest lessons to take because you have to go through them yourself.
Right.
But I will never say that I have learned or I have reached, because I'm always learning, and there's so much to learn, and it's just a fascinating topic. You know, it's just like an ocean of knowledge that we still haven't even tapped the surface of.
Right. So that wonderful glow to you is not only to do with healthy food, but there is a different, I think, this learning and the experience and the joy that you carry with you, with everything that you know. Thank you so much for bringing that joy here to our program. It was a delight speaking with you. Wish you all the best.
Thank you for having me. I'm really, really grateful for that.
Thank you.